What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Fighting Game tutorial series, we are going to be going over regenerating health in practice mode. So let's launch up a practice session. And when we come into the world here, everything will look like what you're used to in practice mode. Except now when I am attacking my opponent, their health will drain, and once my combo ends against them, their health will return to full, just like you see in all sorts of practice modes throughout different fighting games. Another thing that's really interesting about this is we are attacking our AI. Our AI is very basic right now, and if you watch the previous episodes in the series, you'll see what we did with it so far, but now I cannot control this character in practice mode. If you want to have an option to control your second character in practice mode, of course you can do that, but for now I wanted to swap it over to the AI so I could practice against a real opponent in the practice mode, especially for things like this with the health regeneration and setting them to specific states. So although we don't have an in-game menu to do this right now, of course I could go to my world outliner with my AI controller that's in here, and I could change their practice state to say forced blocking. And now you'll see they're in the block state this whole time. The health regeneration still applies, but they're not breaking their block. Of course, this is only the case for practice mode. If we go to versus mode and attack our opponent, they're not going to regenerate health. At the end of every combo, I can attack them, and everything will be normal. So this is specific to practice mode. Now, before we hop into this episode, if you want to get caught up in the series, I'll link you to the entire playlist of the Fighting Game tutorial series right here in the top right corner. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you just care about the health regeneration and practice mode, then I recommend you check out this episode right here, which is the previous episode, Initial Behavior for AI, so that you can start getting your practice mode looking like what we have here in the game. And now with that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. This is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be focusing almost entirely on the code today. There's only one thing I want to do in the blueprints. So let's actually do the blueprint part first. Let's go to our game mode BP, and let's go to our spawn players function. This is where we were setting up what controller was possessing what pawn in the game mode. So if it was versus, we were going to a player controller, and if it was story or arcade, we were going to an AI controller. I want to add practice to the AI controller list. So very simple. In the switch statement where we were determining what the game mode type was, if it's practice, I want to go and spawn the AI controller and then possess that pawn with it. It's not technically required for this episode that you do that, but we are going to be using this in the future, so I recommend just adding that one little update. That way we don't have to do it later. And that's everything we need to do in the blueprints. Told you it was very simple, so now we're going to go to the code. Now specifically we want to go to the fighter template character, and we're going to go to the fighter template character.cpp. The main thing we need to update is our end combo function. So you can scroll down to it and find it. And here we go, here's end combo. This should look very similar to how you saw it in the previous episodes involving this function. There's one major change, and it is the section here where we were checking to see if the other player existed and if their health was less than or equal to 0. That entire if statement has been updated, and now it looks like this. So things have been moved around a little bit, and it might look a little bit confusing, but I promise it's not bad. It's really the same behavior as before, just slightly more efficient, and also taking into account the game mode type, so if we're in practice mode or versus mode and things like that. So everything I have commented out here, we are going to change it, but I just wanted to show you this is what it will look like in your project if you followed my episodes directly, and we're going to update it to look like this. So now, instead of checking if the other player exists and if their health is less than or equal to 0 first, I am actually checking to see if the game instance exists and the game mode exists. Both of these things should exist and be valid when we come into this function, this end combo function, because at this point the characters are already fighting, so the game instance and the game mode should be valid, but we need a reference to them anyway, so checking if they're valid is a good idea. So first things first, I check to see if the game instance exists, and to do that I am casting the get world get game instance to the specific game instance type that we created, which is the U base game instance. So cast U base game instance, and we use get world get game instance. That sets our game instance variable, and if it is valid, we'll go inside of this if statement and we'll check the game mode. The game mode is something we were already checking, but I've moved it outside of the if other player if statement. So I'm going to scroll down to this example below. We were checking to see if the game mode was valid after checking to see if the other player and the other player's health was less than 0. There's not really an issue of doing it this way, but it's technically more efficient to skip out on doing any of this behavior if the game mode is valid, because if the game mode is not valid for any reason, we don't need to do any of this, so there's no reason to do that initial check above. So very, very small change there, but just put the game mode check directly under the game instance check, and that will clean it up just a little bit. Now, I also wanted to check to see if the other player is valid on its own, instead of in an if statement checking to see if their health was less than or equal to 0. This is because if we're in practice mode, I don't care if the health is less than or equal to 0. We're not going to end the round because of it, because it's just practice mode after all. So we just want to check if other player to start. So scrolling back down to the original logic, sure, we move this if statement out, we add this if statement, and now I basically am just getting rid of this part right here. So if other player, and if there's no other player, we don't have to do any of this behavior, because all this behavior relies on at least 2 players. But assuming other player is valid, then we go into this if statement, and I've added another if statement that wasn't in here prior. And that is going to be checking the game mode type. So I use if game instance, game mode type is not equal to e game mode type, : e underscore practice. Game mode type is an enum value in our base game instance, and it determines the actual game mode, so versus, practice, story, arcade, online, or other. If the game mode type is not equal to practice, we want to do all the logic that we were doing in the previous episodes for end combo, because all this behavior is still valid. If it's versus and both characters have 0 or less than 0 health, it was a double KO. We don't want anyone to win the match off of a double KO, so as long as the characters won't win the match due to a double KO, we add round 1, passing in each character. Else we say both characters lost the match. There are 2 things actually different about this section from the previous episode. So the first thing is this if statement, where we're checking to see if player health is less than or equal to 0.0f. Let's scroll down again. You'll see that the logic I just mentioned about the double KOs is inside of an if statement, and that if statement is checking to see if player health is less than or equal to 0.0f. However, remember that above in the previous logic, the other player's health was checked to be less than 0.0f before going into this logic. In our new behavior, that if statement was removed. So instead, I've moved it to this section right here. So this if statement has been updated to not only check player's health, but other player's health as well. Scrolling back down to this behavior again, there's one other difference, and that is the else statement. So if the player health was not less than or equal to 0.0f, then that was not a double KO. So we just want to call round 1 on the character that actually won the round, plain and simple. This is still true, but we need to modify it. So instead of it just being an else statement where we call round 1, we're adding an else if statement here. So else if the other player's player health is less than 0.0f. The reason for this is, if we just had an else statement here and player health or other player's health was not less than or equal to 0, this if statement would fail, which means it would go into the else. So as soon as end combo was called, this if statement would go into the else and it would call round 1. That's not what we want. But when we're ending a combo, we are dealing damage to the other player. So if we check to see if the other player's health is less than or equal to 0.0f, then the round 1 function can be called passing in this character. This character is the one with the combo, and so they are the winner. So now all of this behavior has been transferred over properly. There's only one other thing we have to do, and it is to add the else statement to this if statement that we added earlier, the one where we were checking the game mode type against the practice game mode. So remember, we only want to do the behavior you see here if the game mode type is not practice, because in practice mode, neither of the characters can lose a round. You can't go to a different round. It's all one long continuous round. However, if it is practice mode, there is something else we want to do instead, and this is the regenerative health. If the game mode type is practice, we want to grab game mode and call our reset character health function, passing in other player. If you don't have the reset character health function, I'll go and show it to you now. It's in our game mode. You can go to gamemode.h and see it. And nothing's changed in there. Let's go to the fighter template gamemode.cpp. We'll scroll down to it. Nothing has changed in here either, but if you didn't have it for any reason, you can go ahead and add it now. Otherwise, if you did have it, you can just call it like you saw in fighter template character.cpp. All I'm doing is determining if we should reset both characters or only one character, and if we shouldn't reset both characters, I look at this specific character that we should reset and reset them to their maximum health value. Now in this case of fighter template character, the character we want to reset is other player, because this is in the end combo function. So the character that's on the receiving end of the combo is other player. And that's exactly whose health we want to reset. You could also use game mode player 2 specifically if you are never going to change who is who in practice mode. So if the left player or player 1 is always going to be the controlled player or controlled character, and player 2 is always going to be the AI, you could just manually put that in. But other players should be fine, but that is your regenerative health. So anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode on how to make your health regenerate in practice mode. If you did, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership, Patreon, and Discord supporters. You guys are awesome, and you keep this series alive, so if you're interested in joining those wonderful members of the community, you can click this link in the top right corner right here to check out all the Patreon benefits for yourself. If you ran into any issues during this episode, or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There is a link in the description, and I'd be happy to help you out with any of the problems you ran into. Like I said, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.